Yeah, just say.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I have to read without my glasses. Good evening. This is Monday, September 9th, 2024. The MPO Citizens Advisory Committee meeting is called to order. Do we have anybody joining virtually? Understand we should be.
Yes, there's a few people. I think it's just consultants stuff.
How close do they? Keep it open.
Any voters out there? Committee?
No, I don't think any members are on right now.
Oh, okay. But they aren't on, they're on already or?
No, they're not on. It's just consultants.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I already asked, looks like we do not have a quorum yet. We need 7, so what we'll do is we'll start the meeting. We'll go through the things that we can do without a quorum. And then we will hopefully have a quorum and we can go back and do the action items in particular. And the meeting minutes, approval of the minutes. Okay, so next is the, can we all stand for the I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First off, good evening, everybody, and welcome back. I'm Eddie Abrams, the chairman still. The next part of the agenda is the public comment. And let's see, we have one person, Danny Williams. Danny, you could either talk now or are you here?
I'm here.
Or we can wait until we get to the item 5E, whichever you prefer. I'll leave it to you.
There's no action item involved in what I'm talking about, so I'm happy to just roll with it now and not worry for the next 15 minutes about what I'm going to say.
That's perfect. That'll give us time for maybe a quorum to show up. Good. All right, well,
Hi, I'm Danny Williams. I'd like to bring up some considerations.
Hey, can any of you guys hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
I I was on the technical advisory committee meeting earlier this morning, and they had some internet
Yeah,
difficulties.
they were
there.
having internet.
Okay, just making
Yeah.
sure it wasn't me.
Nope, not you.
Going by my notes here. I guess we still do not have a quorum, so we can't approve the meeting notes,
No, you cannot do that.
and we cannot do anything in 5 as of right.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, because say if you want to, we got a team here from Great Auto Connector, we can certainly do ours, so.
So we
If
get,
we want at 6A, we can do that, and then we'll probably back up, and same thing, we'll still give you brief presentation on all the other items, even if we're not.
because I do questions that okay, so let's, if everyone's in agreement, we will, we'll switch down to 6, start with 6A now. That's a presentation. In agreement?
Yes.
Right. Item 6.
Perfect. Well, good afternoon or evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Rudishouse. I am a consultant, but I work on behalf of FDOT. I'm the manager of the Bradenton Public Center. Today, I'm just going to offer a brief overview of the project. I think we have presented to this group in the past, at least maybe last year. We're just going to for the project briefly, and then we're going to give a status update on where we are with this project in terms of the criteria we're using to screen the project, and then what our steps are. So again, my name is Michelle Rudishauser. Jimmy Vielse, he's not in attendance, he's the District 1 Project Development Manager. He oversees all of the PDs in FDOT District 1. And Gail Woods is here from Trans Systems, she's the consultant PM. So this is the project development at DOT. There's 5 steps project process. The Bridgeton Palmetto Connector is in the planning phase, and so this is like pre-PD&E or pre-NEPA, where we're looking at like 100,000 foot level of the project. If you're familiar with this project, which we have a map here in a moment, the study area is relatively large. We're looking at 10 corridors, and so the goal of the planning level study, this ACE or alternative corridor evaluation, is to take those 10 corridors and narrow them down to something a little more manageable, 2 or 3 corridors. And then we'll transition into the PD&E phase. Good news is that both our current phase and our next phase is funded, and then it's a priority project for FDOT. And so once we get probably halfway through our PD&E phase, we'll be looking to have discussions on funding for future phases like design, right of way, and construction. You may have FDOT Compass. These just sort of outline the goals that of the project that align with the FDOT Compass: improving regional mobility, improving emergency evacuation, integrating innovative solutions, engaging with the public being the center of the FDOT Compass is really the center of all of FDOT projects. So speaking of public outreach, we have done completed 86 meetings for this project. We've met with large businesses, groups like the NAACP, the Chamber, local business alliances. We've attended events, presented at neighborhood associations, agencies such as the TPO or the MPO rather, and then as we're continuing through this process, we're going to continue outreach. In the purple in the bottom right-hand corner there is some of our upcoming meetings that we plan to have in the next few months while we're wrapping up the ACE. So part of the planning and NEPA process for FDOT is identifying and defining a purpose and need for projects, and that's sort of like the guiding principles that that project needs to abide by. And so the purpose and need has to be quantifiable and defendable, and that's sort of the basis for what we evaluate our project against. And so the purpose of the Bridgeton Palmetto Connector is to evaluate additional capacity and transportation demand across the Manatee River as it pertains to the regional transportation system. We've also identified some secondary needs of the project, including safety and multimodal. In terms of the process for this planning level study is to complete a methodology memo first, which what that is essentially an outline or guidance document for trans systems to follow and say, this is the criteria that we're going to use to screen all 10 corridors. And so part of the process for the alternative corridor evaluation process is that methodology memo gets approved by central office, FDOT, which that got approved in mid-August. And so over the last couple of months, the team has been really focused on refining corridors, eliminating corridors, following the criteria in the methodology memo, which is up on the project website. So again, 10,000 foot level planning study. The purpose of the Bridgeton Palmetto Connector is really to identify where the corridors could best be located, not what they're going to look like. So at this stage, we're not looking at typical sections. We're not looking at whether it's going to be at grade or elevated. We're really just looking at where best the corridor can go. Again, we're using the methodology memo to evaluate and compare the corridors against each other. We're in the process of eliminating and refining corridors, and then the next step is to finalize that. We have a public meeting tentatively scheduled for November of this year, both in person and virtual. And then finally, we'll transition into getting the ACER approved and then into the PD&E study in January. I am gonna turn it over to Gail, I believe. Not gonna hit this too many times. It'll probably jump way past where I want it to go. Oh. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Gail and she's gonna go through our criteria we're using to eliminate corridors.
All right, thank you, Michelle. As she mentioned, we have 10 corridors that we will be evaluating. And this is the information that we'll be using. And is we want to provide more traffic over, more capacity over the network. So one of the first things we're going to be looking at is the traffic, looking at the current volumes as well as the projected volumes and crash data. We're also going to be looking at the social and economic. We're going to be looking at the minority population, what businesses, what industries are in the area, residential and commercial. Then we're going to be looking at the cultural, natural, and physical. Are we impacting any cemeteries, historical sites, parks, schools, endangered species? And then finally, how much is it going to cost? Design costs, construction costs, as well as right-of-way cost. So looking at safety again, the primary need is adding capacity within the corridor, and the secondary is the safety and intermodal. So with our spreadsheet, again, we're going to be looking at capacity demand, safety, and the intermodal relationship. How many bikes, how many pedestrians walking, and whatever typical section we end up with, it will accommodate bikes. Yeah, once we get to the next phase. We're also looking for the environmental evaluation. How many residential, we're counting the actual number of residential impacts, commercial impacts, business relocations. We're taking all that. How many cemeteries are we actually hitting? Into the natural, looking at it forested, non-forested, wetlands, looking at floodplains, looking at conservation lands. And then we get over here to the social and economic, the percent of minority population, what percent is below poverty, how many speak English, educational facilities, evacuation shelters. So this is a pretty comprehensive list that we'll be looking for each corridor and comparing them with each other. And then when we look at the project cost, looking at design, looking at wetlands, how much right-of-way, construction, engineering and inspection, and temporary traffic control to come up with a final cost. So again, these are the 10 corridors that we started with. Again, looking at the purpose and need of the project and the secondary purpose and need, we were able to eliminate some of these corridors. So if you look to the west corridor, and we were eliminated, they took the least amount of traffic away. And then in the central area, we have corridor E. This was a very expensive corridor because we had to bridge over the Braden River, State Road 64, as well as the Manatee River. And then we have corridors H and I. And one of the things that we found that the best location for a crossover, another crossing, is really going to be between the DeSoto Bridge and I-75. So the corridors that we're moving forward with are A, B, and D. Our goal is to get down to about 3 corridors that will further study in the PD phase. But as of today, this is where we are at. So look at the schedule. We got our methodology memo approved by the central office. So we as Trans Systems prepared them. District One reviewed it, but it has to go up to central office for the final blessing. They approved it, that's why we're moving forward with the ACER study. We're in the process of doing the GIS data and eliminating those corridors. That will be through September, and then identifying or recommending the corridor forward with. We hope to have it done by October. Open house, as Michelle mentioned, would be in November, and then completing the report in January, and then rolling into the PD&E study with the 3 corridors. And it will be these corridors will be moved forward. So within that study, then that's when we'll look at the typical section, you know, and move it into the paths of those corridors. Are there any questions?
In your presentation, even this particular slide, so D is purple, right?
Yes,
It looks like it utilizes some existing roads and then there's a whole new bridge. And maybe, are there any roads on the other side? Is there, or does it go the whole way to 275? Is that all a new road?
no, that's on, what is that, State Road 683?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it goes along the existing. All of these pretty much go along, existing roads. I think the 2 corridors over to the west, there were small stretches of new roads, but all these would go on.
And is that a new bridge at each one of these locations? Is that?
This would be expanding the existing bridge.
Right,
All of these are new bridges.
that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yes.
So the yellow is new photo, and then the rest of them are all brand new, would all be new bridges. But the goal is obviously not to program all 5 bridges or even 3, it would really be 1 project that the PD&E study will result in.
Yeah, you're gonna, seems like you're narrowing it down to 3.
Yep.
Doing more in-depth evaluation in the PD&E.
Correct.
And then that's gonna result in picking one of those 3.
Correct.
That's the one that move forward.
Yep.
Correct. That is correct.
Using all of the analyses or all the data.
Yes.
Including data, cost, as well as
Correct.
how many cars are being moved. From here.
Correct. And just for clarification, we are replacing the DeSoto Bridge, but it's an in-kind replacement. But such that, let's say we go through this study and say we need 2 additional lanes on the bridge, it can be easily widened for 2 additional lanes. We're setting it up for the future.
That bridge, if I remember correctly, and I'm new to the area, I've only been here for a couple of 2 or 3 years or whatever. But that's a pretty narrow bridge, and if you were to replace it, you'd be using a new model of a wider lanes and wider bike
Yes,
paths, I'm assuming.
Typical section in there, you keep going like 3 slides. There you go.
so yeah, we have 10-foot inside shoulders, 2 12-foot lanes, 12-foot outside shoulder, a barrier and a 12-foot shared path on each side. So what we're doing, we're going to build a new bridge east of the existing bridge, so that once half this bridge is constructed, it will be restriped. This barrier won't be there. It will be restriped, so all the traffic will be shifted to this bridge. We'll demolish the old bridge and then build this half.
You're effectively looking at a 4-lane bridge on each side.
Yes,
Right, while you're building.
yes,
Exactly.
yes.
I'm kind of familiar with that.
Now, the 4 lanes within, sorry, the 4 lanes. And, as you get over into either side, then you go down back to 2 lanes again.
Yep, and that's why.
So there's gotta be some.
If you go back to the sign on bridge, that's why the corridor
Mhm.
is a consideration in our project because our project is addressing the capacity issue. So exactly your point, they're just replacing the bridge in kind is like the terminology that DOT uses. And so we still have to address a capacity issue if 6 lanes is shown to be what's needed out there, north and south of the bridge, and that's what the DeSoto, or pardon me, the VPC project is doing, is looking at the capacity issues, north and south of the bridge.
Because north is like 2 lanes. Or 4 lanes, right?
It's for us.
Can't believe it seems like, I mean. Whatever. I don't know.
It's up by 19, there's more, but yeah, but by like, in the heart of Palmetto, it's little.
Right, exactly.
But you know, you have a new hotel that they just built.
Right, that's what I was thinking, right? The convention center, right?
Yes,
That's
the
right.
convention center is right there. So again, like she said, if this is the corridor that's selected to move forward, we would really look in to see what are those actual impacts, you know, are we taking parking spaces? What are we doing?
And the goal of Bradenton Palmetto Connector is, like the goal of any PD&E study, if you're familiar with PD&Es, is to really get down to one preferred alternative, but it could be possible because this is a very unique project where we could have 2 preferred alternatives. PD&E study, this is strictly hypothetical, but US 41 could be one preferred alternative, and then one of the other corridors could be another preferred alternative. And DOT could look to program 2 design jobs. That's very plausible and could be likely for this project. I mean, we don't know for sure until we get into the PD&E, but it's not out of the realm of possibility for this project.
Where are you in the building of the bridge, the new one? That you're saying was greater fashion.
So we are wrapping up,
Stage are we in?
yeah, so we are in stage 2.
Stage 2?
We're finalizing the PD&E study. And we're almost to the process where it's going to be approved. We've already negotiated for phase 3, so we're going to start that particular phase any day.
Yeah, and then the construction will begin.
2027. The money's already, as you can see, up. So this is for Bradenton Palmetto project. For the DeSoto, everything is funded for design, right of way, and construction.
Are you hearing from the community groups, all the folks that you've been meeting with, that there's a desire for 2 corridors? And the yellow is more across where most of the town population is. And then purple and up to 75. Are you seeing that, hearing that from the community? Or it's too early for that?
We haven't I mean, we haven't asked that question, but exactly heard that either, but the thing that is exactly that there is a more urbanized need, and then there is a need, like a pass-through need from like getting outside of the urbanized areas of Palmetto and Bradenton. So, have any on that?
Now, I think you covered it well. I'll do who you talk to. You know, talk to certain women. We want it elevated, they already know what they want, and then you talk to other people who don't want anything elevated downtown. So we're looking at all those different opinions, and then we go back data. What does it show me?
I think cost is a big part.
And cost as well. And
So
cost
building a
as
brand new
well.
bridge is a lot more expensive than you think, right? So I think that's a huge piece of it, which is why I would caution against the ones on the western and eastern portions where probably process.
Not only that, those 2 corridors over here to the west actually carry the east. amount of traffic, because Green Bridge isn't even that massive. So if you put anything to the Green Bridge, it's going to be even less.
You know, if you look at the nature of West Braden, it's not serving.
Yes.
North. Through. So that makes a lot of sense.
Again, the optimal area is going to be right in there because it's between the Desauk and
You know, is there any thought of compounding the project or adding to it? If you had yellow or, getting to fighting for 275, that would provide more welfare all the way to 75, you know, eliminate the purple. Just adding too much to the concept.
that would be. Could be some, well, no, I think whatever course we have in there, we have to.
If there's some compelling reason, like traffic data wise, why we would extend a corridor, you know, we would definitely look at that as we kick off the PD study. Right now, we're not seeing that, and I mean, it's fair to say a lot of corridors and the limits of these corridors came from a previous study that FTP did that started and ended in these specific locations. Based traffic and data associated with that, but something that we can look into. But right now, it was showing a need at US 4192.
So one of the things, so this is for instance, if corridor A is selected, where are we doing this whole 301 interchange? Where are we doing this whole up in here at the split? So we're looking at the picture. I'm sure we'll all this additional traffic.
Which is on another board too, where, you know, you have the purple and the green, or a discussion with the county on in terms of we talked to Pam on staff about, you know, investment in widening and adding capacity to 301 south county line. So I mean, it's good to see that 3 of the 5 are you count that with the efforts that we're talking about through this similar corridor. I think it would be a great benefit around here with the demand of all the industrial growth and commercial growth down here is certainly as well. So we are giving consideration to the impacts and projects on either side of this study area.
In your groups, you were talking about meeting with groups. What is the definition of socioeconomic demographics? You know, obviously, land rates, a minority group that should be. What is the definition of those folks that are reaching out to try to get some feedback? Palmetto, it's going to be very different than Bradenton when you talk about folks that are more dependent on public transportation and carpooling versus Northwest Bradenton, where it may just be a different population.
So we have reached out to the African American community in Bradenton and in Palmetto. And we have received some names to reach out to the Hispanic community in Palmetto. So as far as demographics, that's what we've done. We've been, I believe we've been to Red Barn. Yes.
In terms of the definition, it's really based on what the minority percentage population is in Manatee County. And then that's sort of our threshold that we use for determining what the local minority population is in both Palmetto and Bradenton. So in the matrices that Gail was showing earlier, that's sort of the baseline threshold that we're using to compare against is like what the Manatee County average is. we look at all socioeconomic data, not just minority, exactly like you were saying. We look at households without vehicles, what is it, how percentage of the population below the poverty line, households receiving limited English proficiency, yeah, things like that. It's not just minority, it's sort of a holistic approach on like the characteristics of those.
Thank you.
Any other questions? for our presenters? Okay, thank you very much.
Last but not least, thank you, great job, drive drowsy.
There you go.
Very good. All right. We move on to E.
This is just be a very quick update. So we maybe have some new faces here. All NPOs across the country are required to adopt safety targets every single year. We are also required to monitor crash data and safety reports in the NPO area. So this is a list of historically when targets. Our seventh set was adopted on January 29th. And the NPO board opted to adopt safety targets of 0. The 5 performance measures that we track, they're based on 5-year averages. And the number of fatality rate, vehicle miles traveled, serious injuries rate, and then the total count of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. Historically, the NPO board has opted to set numbers on this, saying that we would like to see no more than 71 fatalities in the region, but over the last year, the NPO has aligned the targets more clearly with these targets, which are targets serious injuries, which are clearly no death or serious injuries acceptable. That's just a little bit of background. So we use this opportunity every year to sort of look at the crash data and instead of just capturing people who live here, it also captures movement throughout the region. It's a little background there. It is annual crash counts 2020 to 2024 estimated. The column all the way to the right is the crash data that we had available to us up until a couple of weeks ago. And so that's crash data up through June 30th of this year. So compare up to June 30th, we have seen 61 fatalities in the 2-county region and 452 serious injuries. Of those, 17 were non-motorized users who died. Those are our bicyclists and our pedestrians. 54 serious injuries for a total of 71 non-motorized serious injuries and fatalities. You'll see this in a presentation on the safety education campaign later. But anywhere from 20 to 30% of our fatalities are non-motorized users in the 2-county area. So I take that number and we sort of use it to project out to the end of the year. So we might expect to see, by the end of the year. So roll that up into 5-year rolling averages, and we might expect to see a little bit of an increase in fatalities and a continuing decline in serious injuries. So that's the same data again, 5-year rolling averages. The last column is total estimated change from 2020 to 2024. So by the end of the year, we might expect to see a 4.1% across the country. Fatalities are slowly inching up, in the area as well. But across the country and in the two-county area, the serious injuries have been consistently coming down year after year. So that's a positive trend. However, we will keep an eye on the fatalities and the fatality rate. Looking at non-motorized users from 2020 to 2024, what we might expect is we might see a 30% increase in non-motorized fatalities over the last 5 years. That is a very concerning trend. The serious injuries, however, are coming down. So we might expect to see a 17% decrease over the last 5 years or so, for total decrease in about 5% for non-motorized users. So we certainly have a lot of work to continue to do for our non-motorized users and just safety on the roadways generally. And that's what I have for that. So I'm happy to take the questions.
Couple questions? I guess,
Yeah, do you know where the serious injury rate number comes from? Is that from police reports or is it some other source?
So all of the crash data we pull from Signal 4, and that's the database for all crash reports in the state. And then FDOT estimates daily vehicle miles traveled, and so then we do a calculation.
Okay, so just my comment on that is that oftentimes if you're injured and you're not in a car, the people won't hang. If you can limp home, you limp home. You don't put in a police report, you don't call anybody unless it's coming from data or something. I suspect that number is drastically underreported. That would be up to Signal 4 to verify that.
Well, we would have no way of noting that data. I mean, admittedly, there's a huge issue with the data across the board. It's an estimate, right? I always caution people and say these are not, there's lots of accidents that are reported in Signal 4 that might not even be from our area. We heard about that today. We're over-reported from other counties that get reported in our area. Depending on where the cop's sitting in his car, might be where that accident is geolocated. So there's tons of error built in that Signal 4 attempts to have estimates go back and correct. Once again, it's limited in budget and in scale. So yes, that is something that we do have to take into account heavily when we're looking at these numbers. They're estimates, even the actuals are based on the best data available. Yes, it's something that we brought to the attention of statewide agencies across the board, is having consistency from state to state and county to county on how we can report and how we can be more accurate in that. At the end of the day, trend's still not, they would say in the high entry, it's going down, but people's behaviors, speed of cars, that's lending itself to more fatalities, and that's going up continuously regardless of what we're showing. So I think, while it might be, somewhat misleading in terms of the serious injury rate, it's good to see it in theory. I would still pay attention to the fatality rate and our ability to address those more severe crashes. So yeah, that's what we've got right now.
So non-motorized vehicle is being electric bikes and electric scooters. Because if it's 30% going up, it seems like that would be a reason why, because there are people on motorized bicycles, actually electric bicycles, that are traveling at 15 or 20 miles an hour, where normally they would be traveling at 10 miles or 5 miles an hour. Won't ride the bike, right? So we're not differentiating. If it's a bicycle, it's a bicycle, right?
Yes.
It could be a scooter.
Could be a scooter, could be a wheelchair user, could be a skateboarder.
It could be a skateboarder, right? All those things. So to me, I would, maybe hopefully move forward, or somebody would figure out how to differentiate between that. World, yeah, sun trail, and sun trail. We're walking and, I just got on a bike and that thing will fly. I'm telling you, it's scary.
And if I may, one conversation in the future with safety team last month was, that there is a being to the crash reports to maybe see if we can tease out the different cases. But then the crash reports will have to be.
Right.
For statutory. They're shifting to electronic databases. There's some that do their reports. On an annual basis, but I want you all to be aware that we are in the timeline of our annual call for projects. This is where we go through our long range plan and the jurisdictions submit projects for funding consideration to us. That typically runs through the fall. So this year opens September 30th. Asking for applications back by the 2nd of December. We'll then in January create a draft list, which will go to you all again for review, TAC as well as the board for initial review. And then in March, we'll create our final list. It'll go before the board, it'll be adopted. And we'll work with our on getting those projects programmed into the work program in TIP. So just our standards, I want you all aware. So when things come up, you need stuff online that this is to take the projects that we're planning and working into the work program. This is the final time that the jurisdictions request. So any questions, but it's pretty standard.
I guess my comment is,